Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about an introduction to D3. I got a code pen over here, and I'm going to be talking about select, on, select all, data, entering, exiting, and some transitions. So I'm in CodePen, and I have these two SVGs, which have different classes. I got these divs that have some class attributes. We'll be using those later. I also got some CSS about making these the size the way they are. Maybe if I have a click circle, making a certain color. And later I got some buttons, but that's pretty much elementary stuff. The main thing we're going to be looking at is the JavaScript. So in my JavaScript, I have this get random, which I'm going to be using a little bit later. You just throw in a minimum and maximum value, and it throws you a random value for that. But let's jump right into it. We got the select method. And so D3, kind of similar to jQuery, has the ability to get different items, to select them. And once we do that, we could manipulate them any way we want. I also have this abilities to get the plot, which I have here. It's this guy, the first one. And I created this function to draw a circle in it. Looks like that's already happened. Let's figure out what that means. I've passed in an x and y coordinates as well as its size. So we see down here it's being called. We got 100, 120. So it's at the 100 and 100 position and has a radius of 20. And let's see exactly what that means. We take this element, which was pretty much like our canvas, and we're going to be appending a circle. And that circle is also going to have the class attribute click circle, which is going to be used by my CSS to describe its color. And then we have the coordinates value of x, which is going to be the x, the y, and the radius. And actually, if we look at this element, I'm just going to right-click this guy here. It's a little bit underneath my capture, but I inspected that element, and we see, yeah, we got a circle. Its coordinates for the x and y, and its radius is 20, and that's what gets created. So that's great. Continuing on, we could also do some events. So let's say we want to, I'm just going to uncomment that. On this SVG, on the click, we want to call this function. And what is that function going to do? Well, it's first going to get the coordinates using this D3 mouse for this, so it finds out exactly where the mouse position is. And it's going to shoot out the coordinates there, and it's going to call my draw circle with those coordinates. And it looks like I'm just going to specify a value of 30. So if I go to my console here, you can see that when I click, it popped up those coordinates and it drew this. And so that's all that's happening. It's taking this, and if we inspect these again, I'm sorry that's sort of cut off, but we see all these circles are getting created. Boom, boom, creating it. And you also notice that it's changing color. What's that all about? Well, I'm also using this different event, mouse over, which you might be familiar with jQuery and other things like that. And once it goes over top of it, we want to take this SVG and modify its style and make the background color this hex value. And then also on the mouse out, we're going to reset it back to black. So that's what's going on there. I can sort of change this to green, save that, and you'll notice that when I go over it, it turns that color. When I go off it, of course, it's going to turn green. I don't really like the way that looks, so I'm going to change that back. All right, let's continue on. We also have the ability to use data. This is one of the most powerful things within D3. And so I got a bunch of new things going on in this one over here. And so let's figure out what that's about. I had this create chart, so it's actually going to create this chart here. I'm going to get the selection, so similar to how I had that SVG value that I was using up here. But in here, I'm actually getting the chart and then selecting all the recs that are within there. We don't have any that exist yet, so it's going to select any pre-existing ones, but none exist yet. And it's going to take that and plug in my data. Now my data is what's getting called by my function here. You see it's an array with different values. You could already guess, you see how these numbers are just sort of going up. Yes, they represent how much each of these bars is going up. And then once that's sort of selected, we also want to specify, okay, when new data comes in, we want to append a rec and then give its y value, sort of its position, sort of similar to how this had an x and y, its position y, and d represents sort of the data for that particular item, and I represents sort of like the increment of it, starting at 0, going to 1, etc. And here I'm only really using the increment, just so I get it line by line, and it's going in multiples of 30 with an extra sort of 30 on there. And its width is going to be what my actual data value is. So here, the data object that's being passed in, for example, the first one's value is 10. So that gets passed over, that's going to be 10 pixels. That's what's being drawn there. Next one is 30, it's getting 30 all the way down to the 90 and the 100. So if we actually look at this guy, again, I'm sorry that's being cut off, but we see its width, yeah, it's 190, so pretty much following along exactly with the data. We also specify the height being 20, sure, and the fill is a certain color. And again, we can make that fill whatever color we want. We can make that green. Check that guy out. Boom, he's green, we love it. Now what happens if we change the data that's coming in? So I'm just gonna uncomment some more code here. Yes, and actually I'm gonna need to use this as well. And I'll get to what this is doing in just a moment. So here I got this update chart function, which is, let's say I have a chart, but I'm gonna update it with new data. Again, this is this area here, I'm just going to scroll this down so you could really see this for one sec. This value and this value is pretty much the same thing. The only thing that's different is the width value. You'll notice it's down here. Now there's a reason I put it down here. Now the enter is only going to get called when a value enters, when something is brand new, gets put in there. But if some data value already existed within my list of data, this isn't going to get called. And so we want to make sure that whether it's entering or if it has a pre-existing, if it pre-existed within my array, some value, we want to make sure that the width is going to change there. And so let me scroll down and explain that a little bit more. So again, it's going to enter, it's going to put all the values. I said how all the time, whether it's entering or whether new data is coming in. For example, the first time if I had a value which was an array, here I had an array which had 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 indexes. If I had an array with only 1, and then the next time I updated it, I gave a different value here, it will check and notice that, hey, in index 1, there wasn't anything new, it's not entering, so I don't need to create all this. But we'll get to that in a little bit. And also my selection, when I have something that's exiting, I want to remove it. Okay, so what am I really saying here? I'm going to scroll this up a little bit more. You'll notice that now I've sort of made this button here. And actually with D3, we can do some creation stuff as well. Remember within my HTML, let's see if I scroll this over, I had these little buttons there, which are just divs. Let's scroll these guys over. And my chart control, which is this guy here, I'm going to append a div within it. I'm going to make it a class button. And the text is going to be changed, which is what it says there. And on the onClick, similar how I had clicks before, I'm going to call this function where I have my data, which is an empty array, and I'm going to populate it with a list that's either going to be somewhere between 2 elements to 6 elements, and the values are going to be some value between 10 and 300. And then I'm going to update it with that. And so you know what I'm going to add here, just so we can really see what's going on. I'm going to do a console.log and then my data. And I'm going to save that. Looks good. Now I'm going to go over my console over here. I'm going to clear this. And when I click change, you see the values have changed. Now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. And they all equal that value. I click change again. Oh, now I got 4 values and 4 here. So what happened was, as it changed from 5 to 4, one of these data elements was removed. It exited. And so we had to actually remove that item from our SVG. And maybe if I could click again, and now we got 2 removed even more. I clicked again. Oh, I got 2 again. And now we got 3. So here's where something entered. And that's why that enter got called. But notice how there was 2 elements here before. So that means with these areas here, there was nothing new that entered, but I wanted to make sure that the width changed, which is why I don't have it a part of enter anymore. So I hope that makes sense. Let's continue on with the final piece of this puzzle. I'm just going to make a little adjustment here. And this is going to have to do with transitions. So it's nice we've been currently seeing things just sort of popping in, but they haven't really been animating. Here I'm going to take my control 2, again similar, I'm going to add a div, I give it a class button, change with transition, and on the onClick, it's doing the same thing. It's just getting a new random value, and then it's just updating chart with transitions with new data. So let's check that guy out. Let's see if I need to make this a little bit smaller. Thank you. Again, it's passing the data. It's selecting the chart. That's all fine. My enter, has the same value. Here though, now I've made it when it enters, I want to give it a width of 0. And the reason being is I want, when something comes in with a transition, actually I should show you what happens when I click this. And you click it, you notice these guys grow, some of them disappear, and they're really literally transitioning when they get disappear like that, and new values. Oh, we got different color. We'll talk about that in a sec. So that's why my width is starting at 0. When something doesn't pre-exist, maybe something will pop up if I can get it. Well, these guys actually was brand new, and it started at 0 and transitioned to space, into the new width. And here you'll notice that with my selections, I want to do a transition with a duration of 1.5 seconds, where I'm adjusting the width, and it's going to become the final value I want that to be. And when things exit, I want to do something similar. I want to make a transition of the same duration, and I want it to go to become 0. And then I want to remove that afterwards because it doesn't have any more values. Let me have a look at, I'm inspecting the element, sorry, it's getting cut off. But here you'll notice I got these values here. If I change, you'll notice that things all transitioned, and now I got 3 of the rects here, the rectangles. And clicking, oh, a new one got added. And I actually had these on different colors. So on enter, I have it being the sort of, what is that color? It's this guy here. And I'm just going to make them red just for fun. Confirm, make sure I know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so what's actually happening is it's green from before, wherever the heck my green is. I think it's this guy here. Yeah, this is the RGB, that's the green value. So it entered there. But down here, when I'm updating it with transition, if I scroll down, click this guy, boom, you already know what I'm talking about. Things got removed, they're going to come back and they're red. And that's the general idea. Nothing too crazy, nothing too fancy. I hope that was useful for you. If you have any questions, shoot me a comment. I'll do my best to reply. Thanks.